I wasn't expecting this one to be as good as it was, which is funny in its own right, because it wasn't actually rated super highly. I mean, in the overall score of things, it got a 30-something, and a 40 is what I usually consider, generically a good game. And of course, anything over 0 is a positive. That's how that system works. But this still rated better than I thought it would, because I don't have a nice way to say this, because it's not as bad as I was expecting. I mean, this is an old point-and-click adventure game from 1995, which was in development for about 5 years. You're right? You'd think this would be, and instead it's just, okay. It's the Scum engine, and that works, of course. And we've got plenty of things, tiny little gameplay additives. When you're talking to someone, once you've run through all the dialogue, it blues out, so you don't have to talk to that anymore. You can tell what kind of things you can interact with by mousing over them. There's a couple other little quality of life features. My personal favorite, which is actually very much on the gameplay axis and could have been terrible without it, is you can double-click to just warp to a place. Let me explain what I mean by that. I want you to imagine that you've got a screen here. You're over here. You want to go over here. And now you do the screen transition. Now here's the thing. The first time through, I did that every time. The first time I was entering a new screen, I would do the whole walkthrough just to appreciate and enjoy the scene. I'll talk about that in just a moment. But the second, third, 8th, and 15th time through, I'm just going to my new destination. So the fact that the game offers this optional ability to just double-click a destination, a screen transition effectively, and just warp there is brilliant. The only things it doesn't do that on are the trams, which I stopped using after a bit. And I guess that's it. What's funny is the character in-game actually mentions, oh my gosh, this is so much faster than the trams. And I found myself thinking, wouldn't the trams be substantially faster than walking? I know it's a straight one-to-one because of the light bridge, but still, it almost felt like they were kind of talking to, the player a little bit on that one. But anyways, by the way, you like this? 1 day late. Anyways, so the whole thing, just, I don't know. There are some irritations. A lot of people talk about the turtle puzzle. I meant to go look in the VOD to see what I screwed up, because I screwed it up once. And I'm pretty sure what happened is I had one bone facing the wrong way. That's it. I'm pretty sure I can get why that's such an infamous puzzle, but it's like, well, to use Grand Theft Auto as a parallel. If I mentioned Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, what's the one mission everyone mentions as being a crap mission? You just had to follow the damn train, right? I've actually talked about this concept before, because it's not so much that that's a really bad mission. It isn't. It's the fact that it's early on, and it's a bad mission. So it tends to stick out in people's minds, and they tend to remember it more. And thus it kind of enters cultural consciousness more, and more people remember it, more people repeat it, which makes other people remember it more, which makes them repeat it more. You get the idea. It snowballs after a bit. There were several puzzles in this game that I thought were substantially worse than that. I could mention the fact that the color-coded doors were so vaguely colored that I had to actually ask chat to tell me which one was orange and which one was red and which one was green, apparently. I could talk about how there was several sections where I literally couldn't see that there was an object on the ground because it blurred into the background too well. I could talk about my personal favorite. Now, this is a fun one. So there's this one screen, and it is mandatory, where you have to give the tablet, which you've had since pretty much the beginning of the game, to... Her name's not Karen. I'm trying to think of her damn name. Robbins, I think? Shoot, what is her name? Female character. God. I called her Karen for most of the game. You can probably guess why. I'll get to that in a minute. You have to give it to her, and then she deduces the way forwards. The thing is, you can only give it to her on that screen, and that screen isn't even really a super visible, obvious screen to get, and nothing really indicates that that's the screen to give it to her. Now, you might think, oh, so you used a walkthrough. Well, so the approach I used for this game was I had a walkthrough, but I would only refer to it if I actually felt like there was nothing I knew I could do. It's generally my approach when it comes to these kind of games, whether I'm streaming them or not. I play until I run into a total wall. If I go do these things, and I know there's something over there I can do, that's not walkthrough time. If I've run out of ideas, that's walkthrough time, either because I've forgotten something or because, there's something I missed, like there was a dowel on the ground I had to pick up and use on and that was what was preventing me from solving the rat problem right outside the planetarium. Anyways, so in this case, I was like, well, I've been wanting to have her talk about this thing for a while. So on one screen away from that, I used the thing on her. She gives me this whole speech about how it's this whole thing. I'm like, okay, cool, but that didn't do anything. All right, whatever. So I walk down a bit, and then I'm as I'm going through, I'm processing in my brain what to do next. And I realize I've hit a wall. So I glance at the walkthrough. The walkthrough says, go to the screen I'm on. I had a bad walkthrough, by the way. So go to the screen I'm on and give her the thing. And I'm like, okay, well, I did that. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to go ahead and talk to her through the dialogue options and pick it there. No difference. Okay, well, I guess the walkthrough did me wrong. All right, whatever. I happened to notice, while I was, my eyes were drifting because the dialogue was going by the screen and I'd already read it, that there was a hole up there. And I was like, I wonder if that's clickable. And I clicked, and sure enough, it is. And I go through and I'm like, I wonder if I give it to her here. And that's the solution. So I just kind of bumbled my way into what is probably the worst puzzle in the entire game. Now, I'm a moron. I freely admit that. But, there were a couple like that. So here's the thing. I gave the game a negative for what is effectively pixel hunting and what is effectively walkthrough-itis. Now you're probably thinking, oh God, a whole negative for that. No, that's praise. I want to be very clear about this. I actually played a lot of these old point-and-click adventure games back in the day. I don't remember all their names. If I saw pictures of them, I could probably identify them, visual memory, and I remember some of the puzzles and solutions. I'm not saying I beat all of them, because I certainly didn't. That happened more in the GameFAQs era, but I played a whole lot of these, and with the experience I have with those, I can tell you that only one negative for a point-and-click adventure game on this axis is actually pretty good. And that's kind of my overall point. The game got a net gameplay score of +1. Remember, anything above 0 is good. Net positive, right? So, make of that what you will. Take that however you want. The gameplay axis was better than I thought it was going to be. It could have been much worse. And honestly, I should have seen that coming because it's a LucasArts game. And, story. So, there's some brilliant stuff in this game, really. But, and I can tell you about the behind the scenes, although actually, even after having looked it up, I'm not 100% sure of the exact path this went through. It's something like, let's make a movie, let's make a show, let's make a game, let's make a game, let's make a game, let's make a game, The Dig. That's the extremely brief summarized version of what happened in the creation of this game. That's why it took 5 years to make. The original impetus came from Spielberg. By all accounts, he apparently tossed this at Lucas. The two of them decided they couldn't do the story idea justice with the technology they had at the time. Reminder, this would have been somewhere in 89. So they decided, let's push in another direction. And Spielberg was working on his whole Fantastic Adventures show, which I don't remember the name of right now. And so they thought about doing it in that direction, and that fell apart. And then they decided, well, let's make it into a game. Funny little factoid about Spielberg. I don't know if this is true still, but back in the 70s and 80s, Spielberg was actually really pro-video game. In fact, he was too pro-video game, which I know sounds weird coming from me. But what I mean by that is he was really trying to push gaming as a thing. And so he would put his stamp on an inordinate number of games, whether he should have or not. There's actually an interview about him talking about, for example, the E.T. Atari game, yes, that one, where he was just like, this is fantastic, because it was a game. Now, that's only one example, and it's probably the worst example, so forgive me for jumping to that. But that was kind of his thing in general. The reason I mention all of this is he did put some weight behind making this actually happen. And, well, I mean, it's LucasArts, right? They certainly had some weight and some studio power behind them, both financially and in terms of what kind of pull they could do, right? So a lot of push was actually put into this game. Surprisingly large amount of pedigree. We got Orson Scott Card involved, obviously. And Alan Dean Foster was another writer who got involved in this one. I know that they aren't literally the writers of the game. With something like this, it's more like they were part of the writing process that eventually became the game and the manual and the book. So let's just kind of lump that in there, because who knows who did what exactly, am I right? Like, you could see a couple of fingerprints here and now, especially some of the early dialogue feels very Orson Scott Card, but otherwise, your guess is as good as mine. But I mention all this because we have all this pedigree, we have all this quality. This is a game that if you looked at it, it's like, oh yeah, no, that's going to be a good game. And it is. I have to share one little tidbit because I love this. This game has, the T-1000. He even references it as the main character. And, oh shoot, I lost her name. Maggie something. No, that's the actor. Oh God, I've completely lost it. Hang on. I can't remember the name of the woman who played her. Give me one moment. This won't take me long because I've got it right here. I was going to say it's in my history because I was just looking this up. This was Mary Weiss as Maggie Robbins. There we go. That's how I was getting that screwed up. She's actually done quite a bit of things too. She's okay. She's actually probably the worst actress in the game. Not her fault though. And I mean that. If you analyze voice acting for a long period of time, you can tell when it's the actor or actress, and you can tell when it's the director. The voice director in this game was not good. That's the nicest way I can put it. The other two actors, the T-1000 and the one I haven't mentioned yet, managed to do a decent job despite everything, but you could tell that more direction was needed to really get across what's happening. When your response is, hey, what do you want from me? To a giant spider alien that's trying to eat you, maybe your director isn't doing their job properly. But hang on, I'm building up to a point. Steve Blum is the other person. Steve Blum plays Brink. Now, how many of you knew that, first of all? Real honest question. What I find amusing about this is, near as I can tell, this was what... So you know how most actors have something that catapults them to stardom? Well, actually, it's a two-step process. You have to get on the catapult, and then you have to be launched. I know that's a bad analogy, but it's true. You can't get to the catapult unless you're already in the business, doing jobs, trying to get someone's attention. Once you get someone's attention, you get a role. That role launches you, you're good. So this is Steve Blum getting on the catapult, to continue back to my analogy. This is actually his 12th role ever. That may not sound very early on in his career, but trust me, it was. All he'd done before this was a few anime dubs and a couple of direct-to-VHS movies. This was way back. And he does a very good job of Brink and the various paths he goes through as he discovers the beautiful, beautiful arc of cocaine. I suppose this is as good a time as any to mention one of my problems with the story, and that's that the life crystals are totally drugs analogy is a little bit too overt and a little bit too smashed into my face. Given that this was originally pushed out and was being written across the early 90s, that makes sense. But it is just a little bit, really? Like, some of the dialogue, you don't actually even have to change what they're saying to just replace it with, hard addictive substances, and there you are. Now, that being said, though, I have one other issue with the game, and it's actually the ending, so I'm not going to get to that just yet. Because the rest of the game is actually awesome on the narrative axis. So let's talk about some of the things it does right, and how, and why. Because that's always what I love to dig into, the how it manages to be so good. How does it start off? There's this asteroid. Actually, no, it starts off this dude just chatting on the phone. Hey, what's going on? How are things? Yep. Everything's cool. I need to call you back. And there's an asteroid on collision with the Earth in 3 weeks. Now, this is so understated, and it's so brilliantly done. Whoever the director of photography and it's Michael Hand, I think, did the music. God, I was just looking at it. I think it's Michael Hand. He did a lot of the old LucasArts songs, and he's brilliant. If you've ever listened to, I don't know, TIE Fighter or Monkey Island, you've heard his music. Anyway, so we have this brilliant, ominous, and yet quietly, almost reverential music. Like, it's almost like you're in awe of this asteroid as you're hovering over the Earth and just going out and trying to deal with it, kind of thing. There's this whole prelude, this whole lead up to it. And the music perfectly accentuates the tension and dread of this entire sequence as you're going and putting the nukes on this thing to figure out what's going on and why and how and so forth and so on. Then you crack it open, you go in, you find out that there's stuff that clearly is, manufactured. And then that's when your main character says, yeah, so we foresaw this as a possibility. Mission parameters have changed. This is now a military op. We're going to operate a little bit differently. Then we go inside. We have the thing happen. It turns into a spaceship, zooms out, FTLs away to another star system. Now, I just sped through that But everything about that entire sequence is awesome. The visuals get across the scope and scale of this thing. It's not actually that large of an asteroid. It's large enough, obviously, but it's not super huge. You can see the people in the distance as little sprites like that as you're moving through the quadrants. And there's a sufficient amount of stuff to do and time spent in this asteroid mission section that you might actually be believed that this is the whole mission. Because then it starts going, okay, we're going to dig into the asteroid and we're going to go back down. And it's like, aha. And what I was thinking this whole time was that's where we were going. Have I mentioned I've never played this game before? I didn't know. So when we get in there and activate the thing and FTL off and end up on an alien planet, I was just like, what? I want to pause for a moment in my praise of this game to mention that some of you may know that I have a fairly stark and fairly stringent anti-mentioning policy. And you're probably thinking, what does that mean? Well, I'm not going to give examples because it would violate the policy, but I just gave you one. I suppose that's also my spoiler warning for the episode. I have violated that a few times in the past, mostly on my DS9 videos. I'm still embarrassed about that. I have no defense other than it was 5 years ago. Or 7 years ago now. Damn, time keeps moving forward. Can we stop time for a second? I try not to spoil things in unrelated things. That's why I'm not even giving examples. But I'm sure you can think of plenty of examples of books, movies, shows, and games where something that isn't a spoiler, something that isn't it was his sled happened. But it's such an awesome moment that first moment of or ha or oh or whatever emotion it invoked in you was just kind of cool, right? And that's what I got, not realizing that there was going to be an alien planet and the actual plot of the episode, or excuse me, the game. And I loved that. I loved that moment. I loved the realization that we're going to this alien planet and there's going to be this whole alien civilization thing and we're going to figure out what's going on. And there's this ship that's landed here. We're not the first ones to make this journey, as we can infer later from when we talk to the architect, and just awesome, right? So we've got this brilliant music, we've got this brilliant visuals, we've got this brilliant animation, we've got good voice acting. At this point, her voice actress is doing a better job because she's supposed to sound serious and on the job and just kind of slightly snarking. And that works here. It's later on when the director isn't doing their job. So voice acting's on point, visuals on point, music's on point. And then it's just something else. So music's been playing the entire game. And then we get warped there. We end up on the spot, right, where we're walking. No music. There's a bit of a wind, but there's no music in general. Then the camera zooms out and we see the crater and we see these dots. And of course, we've already seen this scale, but now we get to see it from a different perspective. The camera really zooms out as we move around throughout the crater trying to interact with the things we can. It's almost an overworld in terms of game design, but from a narrative perspective, what it does is it gets us into the feel and vibe of the game. It is, put bluntly, directed. In fact, the game does this consistently. One of the other things, I'm going to skip forward a little bit. One of the other things the game likes to do is there's connecting rooms. There's nothing in these rooms. There's no story elements. There's no quest items. There's no event triggers. There's no puzzle things. There is 0% reason for those connecting hallways to exist. And if not for the fast travel thing, this would qualify as padding. But every single one of these is just there to emphasize the narrative side of things with the camera. Now, obviously, you don't literally have a camera with this case, but you do figuratively have a camera, and they did have a director of photography, and they were doing their damn job. I bet if you've played this game right now, you can think of several scenes, scenic areas or vistas, where it's just, you could just pause a moment and see. Like, there's this one that stuck in my mind, where you start off, the camera's actually way back here. I guess I'll kind of do it from your perspective. So it's way over here, and we're on the opposite side of a cavern, and there's a river going between us. And we're just walking over here, up and then through the distance. And we have to go quite a ways to actually finish. And it really helps to emphasize the size of the place and also the feel of this alien world we're going through. The visuals do so much of the narrative's job for it, which is a good thing because the characters don't. I praise the hell out of this game's narrative, but the characters are ultimately fairly unmemorable. They have some good banter, there's some good dialogue, and there's some good writing. But I bet there's going to be several of you who can't even name all the characters off the top of your head. I can't even think of the name of the main character right now, the guy played by the T-1000. And I have trouble remembering her name this whole time. I just kept calling her Karen on camera. I know some people who have actually played this game and couldn't name any of the main characters in it like a week later. They're not really memorable. they're not really the focus. And that's fine. They don't have to be. It's just that's not a positive. It's more like an absence of what I like to call a wash. So that's a wash. Okay, cool. But the way the construction of events goes is interesting in its own right. Because we go around, we get this, we get this. We get the what do you call it? The compass that points to the frickin' pendant. We get the bracelet, which we'll need in like 5 hours for another puzzle. I mean, it's a point-and-click adventure game. What do you want from me? And when we go through all that, oh my god, Brink dies. And I'm like, what? Brink's dead? And then the first other hiccup in the story happens. Maggie just leaves. She doesn't sound freaked out like this is her way of coping. She just sounds like splitting up is the right choice. I almost gave a negative for this. The only reason I didn't is this pseudo-drama, pseudo-idiot bawling only lasted a grand total of 2 scenes, and then it just was forgotten forever, which is also kind of weird. But, it's whatever. And then we just start exploring a bit, and it's like, okay, and we put the pieces together, and we find out that these people figured out how to go to the other dimension and split their consciousness across space-time 6 as opposed to space-time 4, which is where we are right now. And they're smeared across time and space. Okay, that sucks. It sounds like hell, actually, the way they describe it, because you can't interact with anything there. You're just stuck there. They've also invented these life crystals, which are totally crack, but they can resurrect the dead. You ever feel bad for that turtle? Did you know if you get the turtle puzzle partially correct, which I did my first time, the turtle actually does start to get up, and then it melts to death? Yeah, we're not evil. We also get Brink up. And the moment he gets it, I actually chose his scene for the thumbnail for this for very specific reasons. Because it's like, oh my god, he's evil. He's the villain of the game. Because he gets up and he starts talking about how he is now perfect. And if only the world can be as beautiful as I. And I totally freaking called it, of course. Because it's not exactly being subtle about it. But several people in chat are like, Lord, you're just being too harsh on him. Fast forward a few scenes where he threatens to kill people if he doesn't get his crystals. And people in chat are like, okay, never mind. But what I find most interesting about this game is it's reasonably well written, and it's reasonably well presented, and it's brilliantly told from the music angle, from the visuals angle. I imagine the visuals and the music are at least half of why this game is as well remembered as it is. The actual plot is there. It doesn't really come in until the end. I mean, the plot until about the last 30 minutes is we're trying to figure out where we are and how to get home. I did read that they were going to add in survival mechanics. I'm kind of glad they didn't, because I honestly feel that would just bog it down in terms of pacing with regards to the gameplay axis, which is already, barely net positive. But then we get to the end, and it turns out that everything's perfect forever. What? All right, hold on. Let's rewind a second. Before I start bashing the crap out of the outro and talking about the whys and the wherefores, allow me to go ahead and mention that I really do actually enjoy one line. We are super advanced and we wish to spread life throughout everything, and everything will be cool, but humans might also be evil. Don't worry. We know that all the young races try to get us. And if you try to get us, we'll squash you like a bug. I love that line. I have to comment on that one line. Several people in chat are like, it's you, Lord, it's you. So Brink is losing it. And we're like, okay, well, we'll go do this weird non-puzzle with regards to making new life crystals. And we put in the device, and 2 life crystals pop out, and he says, that's not enough. I need more. And then we're like, yeah, well, we'll take these 2. You can have the rest. And he's like, no, I'll kill you. And then a cartoon plays. Now, the cartoons have been playing the entire game, along with some CGI. The CGI was actually really expensive and cost bad. Cost prohibitive, there we go, that's the word, for the time. But something that Lucas and LucasArts were both pushing a lot was the early CGI stuff. You'll be hearing more about this in my Pixar Ruminations, which start going live in about a month and a half, I think, at this point. Anyways, I recorded that stuff over a year ago now, so what the hell do I know? But I do remember that was something that Lucas has always been really big on pushing. He's always been a technology-minded person. He wants to make the cameras better. He wants to make the technology better. He wants to push CGI. He wants to do more with the tech side of things, because that's always been his wheelhouse ever since he first got out of film school, or into film school even. So it makes sense, right? So CGI scenes, cool. But the actual cartoon scenes suck. Now, I decided not to give them a negative in their own right, because they only really detract from the game in 2 points, and I'm giving those 2 points. I have given those 2 points separate negatives. But the cartoons were not good, even for the time, even for 1995. This is post Darkwing Duck. This is the era of Beast Wars, to use a CGI example. I could actually name several examples, but you get the general idea. Just look at the quality of animation that existed in this era, and you can see why I find this to be unacceptable. But wait! I have a much bigger reason why I consider it to be unacceptable. The sprite work is great. It's not the best. I've seen better. But the sprite work and the animations and the blocking and the storyboarding of the sprites did a better job of animating cutscenes than the actual cartoon animations did. And in virtually every case, I just kind of wish they'd just used the sprites. They're more expressive, they've aged better. But more to the point, they were better designed. There's several examples of this, but the biggest example by far is the aforementioned scene I just mentioned. So, we hit the button, two things pop out, Brink loses it, and what it plays is a cartoon. What happens in this, and I'm going to describe this very particularly, is we are hunched over. He's just threatened to kill us, and we're hunched over it, and Maggie's just sitting back doing nothing. He threatens to kill her too. Then he does a tackle at us, and we are knocked down to the ground, and we just lay there on the ground like this, face down, right? And then Maggie is like, no, and then he grabs her and throws her back. And then Brink picks up a big rock, and then something happens. Your interpretation is as good as mine. I assume it was the power of the crystals ran out, or maybe he was weak, or tired, or hungry, or whatever. There's like a dozen options here, but whatever. And he goes, and he trips and falls to his death, the end, over us. The whole time we're struggling to even stand up, because that tackle was just so bad. And then the scene ends. The blocking is bad, the storyboarding is bad, the action is bad, and it makes no sense. It also deflates the impact of the scene in its entirety. Tell me that wouldn't have worked better if it was just the sprites. But hang on, it gets funnier. How many of you knew that you can then go and interact with the machine and get more life crystals? Infinite more life crystals. You can get as many as you want. Let me really lay that out, because this amuses the hell out of me. I want you to imagine that you're at a copier. Those of you who remember what that is. I just realized that's kind of an old device. Hang on, let me put on my old man hat again here. It was a hard night at the copier. What the hell? I don't have a hair on this. I don't have any hair. Anyways, who's been using my hat? So you're just sitting there at the copy machine, and someone's like, I need that copy. I need you to make a copy of this. I don't have anything paper on my desk. Pretend I have this really cool piece of paper. I need a copy. Put it in. Okay. I'll kill you if you don't. Okay. Don't worry. I'm going to go ahead and press the copy button. And one copy comes out. And he starts freaking out. No, it's only one copy. I need more. And then he tries to murder us and falls to his death. We then hit the copy button again, and another copy comes out. And we could do this infinitely, because that's how that freaking works. Then we get to the actual outro. Now, the inventor has made this big point about how these are my biggest mistakes that I've ever made. I invented the life crystal, and I invented the way to go up to space-time 6. Man was not meant to know these things. Blah, blah, blah. Forgive me for saying blah, blah. I've never liked that line in general. But in this case, it's very clear that the game has been pushing this narrative basically the entire game. This is not something you're meant to know. This is not something you're meant to do. This is beyond you. Blah, blah, blah. That's been a very consistent theme, along with the drugs theme. So that's all there. And that's all the thing. And Brink dies, but it's okay. The game makes it very clear that wasn't Brink anymore. Okay, so we've restored things. It's a good thing that he's dead. And then Maggie dies. Now, what's funny, and I do mean hysterical, in what is probably the best cutscene in the entire game. Gotta get our daily mandated suicide in here, you two. Is she gets resurrected. I'm sorry. Compose. You can resurrect. You can use one of the extra crystals you just got from hitting the copy machine again. And you can use that on her, and she'll get up. And she will realize what you've done. And instantly and without hesitation or any doubt or anything, she gets up, races to the cliff, and leaps off to her death, committing suicide. That's awesome. The fact that I know that it's so amusing, but it's partially because it's so horrifically, darkly well written. Because if you were resurrected by that crystal, having seen what it did to Brink, wouldn't you do the same? And that's why it works so well. Then you beat the final boss, which is a dog, by letting it drop into a river, or the ocean, excuse me. Is this an ocean planet? It looked like an ocean planet from the scans. And then you go in and you go into the space-time 6, and then you come out. And then Deus Ex Machina happens. Some of you may or may not remember, Deus Ex Machina traditionally came from the idea that some of the old writers were, let's call them bad writers, because what they would do is they would write themselves into a corner. And so one of the deities from on high would come down and fix everything. Deus Ex Machina. And that's pretty much what happens here. Now, I know Spielberg didn't write this, but he certainly had his fingers in this, and he certainly had some of the core ideas. And I mention that because there's this really weird tendency Spielberg has to insist on a happy ending without knowing what it takes to make that happen. I'm sure you can think of several examples of that off the top of your head, if you really think about it for a minute. He got worse about this as he got older, but the idea was he would have a story that's just happy ending. No build-up, no earning it. It's just Deus Ex Machina. He just wanted a happy ending. Done. I don't mind happy endings. In fact, I rather enjoy them. But you kind of have to work for that. And that's what this ending feels like. Not only is it unearned, it comes out of absolutely nowhere. It is definitely a more or less literal Deus Ex Machina. Oh, did I mention that that the aliens show up and just bring Maggie back to life? No consequences. Although she's mad at you if you resurrected her. And they bring back Brink. No consequences. He's cured of his addiction. And then they send you back to Earth and everything's perfect forever. Huh? And if you're picking it up on it, it sort of flies in the face of the themes of the rest of the work. However, other than that outro and a couple of other stumbles on the way, I really liked this game. A lot more than I thought I would. It certainly brought back a lot of memories, both good and very, very, very bad. But this was definitely a net positive experience, and I hope you enjoyed my thoughts. I'll see you next time.